Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will meet the French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris next week. He says it will be a reset of diplomatic relations after the Morrison government cancelled a submarine deal last year following huge cost blowouts. Joining me live now is the Shadow Foreign Minister Simon Birmingham. Simon Birmingham, thank you for your time. With a little hindsight, do you concede that this whole situation was handled poorly?
Well, LJ, decisions were made in the national interest, and those decisions were that Australia should not proceed with the contract that had been entered to with the French company Naval Group in relation to building a diesel-powered fleet of submarines for the future, and that we should instead seize the new opportunity that had emerged for Australia to have a nuclear-powered fleet of submarines in the future. And that was about firmly, squarely acting in the national interest. But it was always understandable that the French, in the loss of such an enormous commercial contract, would indeed be disappointed, and that there would be tensions created by that. Now is clearly the time for those matters to be put behind us, and I welcome the fact that the Prime Minister will be meeting President Macron. I look forward to them hopefully being able to put those matters behind the two nations, because our shared values and our shared interests across the globe are far greater than a commercial contract that existed between our two nations. It's crucial that we work together in the pursuit of those values and interests, which events such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine and other global factors put very much a spotlight on the crucial nature of cooperation, especially then when we look into our region and the important role that France plays alongside Australia with Pacific Island partners.
Why does it take a change of government to reset with France, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure that it necessarily does. There's a time factor that would always be at play here, and now, following the conclusion of the commercial settlement and terms around those matters, would and should always have been the time for France to be willing to move on. The disappointment is understandable, it's real, but Australia's decisions were made firmly and squarely in our national interest and about ensuring that we have the defence capabilities that our military needs for the future in a region that is more contested, in a region facing increased militarisation from other nations. And that's why the decisions were taken to look not just at what the difficulties might have been for a year or two from the decision that our government took previously, but to look at what Australia's national interests would be for the next few decades and beyond. And that's crucially why we took that change. We knew that there would be concerns and there would be disappointment from the French side, but now the commercial terms have been resolved. It's firmly, squarely time for France to work with Australia and Australia to work with France on those many areas of shared values and interests. And it's a timely opportunity, given that Prime Minister Albanese was going to be in Europe anyway, for him to be able to undertake this meeting.
Do you accept that there was a very strong personal element when it came to Emmanuel Macron? And it appears Emmanuel Macron's cabinet, they just did not like Scott Morrison in the end.
Well, I understand that in elements of the commentary that played out, it was portrayed in a personal light. Those things shouldn't come into it, and they should never come into it between two countries. Now is the right time, following the elapse of some time, following the conclusion of commercial negotiations for the settlement, for the parties to be able to get back on with business. And there's important business to be done through our cooperation in the region, in working together as partners, together with all of the Pacific Island nations, through our cooperation through international fora and the type of cooperation I trust will ensue at the NATO summit that's happening, where I expect that Europe will continue to further advance their support for Ukraine, and I hope and trust that we will see the new Australian government demonstrate that it will continue to build upon the record levels of support from outside of Europe or the Americas that Australia has been providing to Ukraine and its resistance against Russia's war on its people.
So do you think Anthony Albanese should go to Kiev?
Well, look, that's a matter for him, Ukraine and security officials to navigate. If the opportunity's there, then that would of course be welcome. But what's more important is the tangible support provided. Our government ensured that there was military assistance, there was humanitarian assistance, there was practical assistance to Ukraine. And it's crucial the new government continues to build upon that And so Anthony Albanese, most importantly, needs to take to Europe with him a package of continued assistance and support for Ukraine. Whether he delivers that package through the NATO summit or through a visit to Kiev, that's a matter for scheduling and security considerations.
Okay, let me talk about asylum seekers and Sri Lanka. We saw the new Home Affairs Minister go to Sri Lanka just weeks after she was sworn in. What do you think is going on here with the number of boats and the number of boats that have been intercepted and returned?
There's clearly enormous crisis situations occurring within Sri Lanka, and the pressure through the economic calamity that's been happening there is very real on the Sri Lankan people. And the humanitarian assistance, financial assistance that Australia has provided in helping to supply stocks of foods and medicines is exactly the type of thing that Australia should always be doing, and that is clearly welcome. But that pressure flowing through Sri Lanka does present further risk in relation to the movement of maritime vessels. What is critical there is that the new government makes clear that Australia's Operation Sovereign Borders remains firm and resolute, that we don't end up with a situation where people smugglers are able to take advantage of the unfortunate situation that so many Sri Lankans find themselves in, and by taking advantage of those Sri Lankans place their lives in peril and jeopardy through the dangerous trips across the oceans. It's crucial, therefore, that the government also reconsider its stance in relation to temporary protection visas, one of the pillars that just helps to ensure there is a clarity of message that comes when they present arguments that illegal operations for people smuggling will not result in resettlement in Australia.
Why does this government need to do that when the measures in place are clearly working as is for the last couple of months?
Well, we're still very early days of the new government there, and we know that people smugglers will seek to exploit any area of weakness in policy. And if they do exploit that area of weakness in policy, at the same time as they're exploiting the vulnerabilities of individuals in a country like Sri Lanka, then we risk the situation where we see that terrible human toll again through loss of life at sea. That's what we should all wish to avoid a loss of control over Australia's borders, but critically to avoid the humanitarian toll that comes through the evil people smuggling trade. It's a fact that under our government, as had been the case under the Howard government, the cessation of the people smuggling trade was achieved through a series of actions, of which temporary protection visas were one of them, and that's why the new government should be very careful about the approach they've taken that leaves a chink in that armour that had to now been so successful.
Simon Birmingham, great to talk to you. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Laura. My pleasure.